So coming up in this set of weekly challenges, we go ahead and throw an iconic little Mazda around Autopolis. We then get to go ahead and test the grip limits on a French boat. We then head to the iconic Trial Mountain, putting down 800 brake horsepower in a SEMA winning monster, before heading over to one of Europe's most iconic tracks and Spa for the WTC 600, and to finish off we end at the Red Bull Ring with the Neo Classical, and of course a bunch of legendary endurance races. But before we get into the main meat of this video, I'm trying to get this channel to 60,000 subscribers by the end of this year, so if you want to stay up to date with everything Gran Turismo and motorsport gaming related, then feel free to leave a like, subscribe and turn your notifications on. Anyway, let's get to it. So here is an overview for the week then. This is July week 1 and it will end on the 10th of July 2025 at midnight for your local time zone. As for race 1, it is Autopolis International Racing Course, and that is the Japanese FR Challenge 450. After that we head to Willow Springs International Raceway, and once again it's the streets of Willow Springs, this time for the Peugeot SUV 2008 one make. Really unfortunate that we're kind of forced to use one of the worst type of vehicles in GT7. We then head over to Trial Mountain Circuit and the American Clubman Cup 700. For event number 4, we go over to the WTC 600 at Spa and finish off with the Neo Classic competition at the Red Bull Ring. That one will feature both tyre and fuel usage as well as mixed weather conditions. As for the rewards this week, one event is 100k, 3 events is 200k, and 5 events is possibly the best reward, a 6-star roulette ticket, which can feature up to 1,000,000 credits as well as some of the best cars in the game. So let's go ahead and get into the first event of the week then. This is the Japanese FR Challenge 450. This one takes place at Autopolis International Racing Course on the full layout. Now of course it's aimed at Japanese FR layout cars around 450 pp, but that is being very generous as a lot of them are nowhere close to that. In fact, I would say the majority are probably around 350 to 400 max. Anyway, let's get into it then. My car of choice here was the Mazda Roadster NRA. I did put a few upgrades on it, turning it to around about 445 pp in the end. Anyway, let's get to the event itself then. There's a total of 8 cars on the grid, 7 AI up in front of you over a 2-lap sprint race, meaning that there is no tyre wear or fuel usage for this one. However, those 2 laps may feel like it takes forever since these cars are so slow and the track is rather quite long for slower vehicles. Now as for the AI, honestly most of them are pretty easy to beat, especially a lot of the old ones. Again, Gran Turismo 7's AI just really tends to overdrive them and they'll end up all over the place, so you'll probably get the majority of your overtakes done with relative ease. There is a couple of cars to watch out for. The first is going to be the likes of this Nissan 180SX, which can be very quick compared to the rest of the field, and the second is the Toyota 86 GT. That car again is definitely the highlight of the field and easily the quickest overall car that will probably spawn into your event. As you can see here, it made short work of pretty much everything as it worked its way to the front of the grid. After that it was then time for a quick last lap battle between myself and the Toyota, managing to just keep up through the corners and really throw the Mazda in there to get this overtake done. Whilst we may not have the overall raw pace of the Toyota, we definitely managed to take advantage of the smaller, more nimble Mazda here. We'd go on to have a fantastic final sector, building a lead of just over 2 seconds in the end as we cross the line for our first tick of the week. Now of course in terms of the payout, this one is going to be relatively low. As you can see, 34,500 credits with that clean race bonus, so not paying too much, but we do get a nice boost and bonus of 100,000 credits for completing the first event of the week. Okay, so moving on to the second event of the week then. This is this week's special event, which is at Willow Springs International Raceway and features the streets of Willow Springs. Now this is the Peugeot SUV 2008 one make, and unfortunately all of the AI are set to completely stock and standard cars, meaning that there's no real point in upgrading here. So it's a 3-lap sprint race with a total of 10 cars on the grid. Your specified car is the Peugeot 2008 Allure from 2021. As for the rewards, it's 47k, 28.2 and 18.8. Main rival cars are of course all 2008s, completely stock and standard as I mentioned. BOP is off, you must use a garage car, and car settings are allowed. Race settings, there is no damage and there is no penalty settings on here. Now I have to admit here, this might just be the weakest special event we've ever had. As for the car, of course I would be using the Peugeot 2008 completely stock and standard as well. So here we go then, a total grid of 10 vehicles, 9 AI up in front of you, over a 3-lap sprint race. Now if you were to upgrade, your lap times would be probably around about a minute or so, maybe even less. However, there's really no need to actually do that. Again, if you actually want to get any enjoyment out of this, you'll have to go ahead and race a completely stock 2008 on the hardest difficulty to at least get some kind of challenge. But honestly, the AI just cannot drive these vehicles, and they're pretty much all over the place, meaning that they're pretty much like shooting a fish in a barrel. If I'm totally honest, they are not the most enjoyable thing to race. Every now and again you'll get a glimpse of hope, like here, where you'll get side by side with one and think that you'll be battling all the way down the straight to then just fly past them. It really isn't the most entertaining event, I have to be totally honest there, and was definitely probably the most weakest and unenjoyable one I've really ever done. I guess really the only event we can compare to this special event would be the Renault Kangoo one make, but at least when it came to those, they did upgrade the vans so that you could actually, you know, upgrade your own vehicle and have really nice tight racing with them, where unfortunately this just isn't the case for this one. I feel like there is a wasted opportunity here to actually make the Peugeot seem a bit more exciting. I'm sure Polyphony knows it's been getting a lot of hate, and to not maybe throw it on the dirt with a bunch of upgrades really feels like a massively missed opportunity, and instead you get this really dulled down experience. Anyway, tick number 2 of the week. I don't think anybody will have any problems whatsoever here. 47,000 credits, not getting the clean race bonus, and 5.2 miles travelled. Anyway, the third event of the week, things are going to get much better. This is the American Clubman Cup 700, of course aimed at American cars around a 700 pp rating. This takes place at Trial Mountain Circuit, of course an original Gran Turismo track, and overall is a much more enjoyable time than the previous event. So let's go ahead and see my car choice. Now as for my car choice, I went for the SEMA winning Chevy Nova, which is an absolute handful, putting out around about 800 brake horsepower and tuned to around about 700 pp. And honestly, it was genuinely a really enjoyable cruiser type experience. So as for the race then, it's a total of 5 laps in a sprint format. So again, no tyres and no fuel usage. There's a total of 12 cars on the grid, 11 AI, mainly made up of American muscle cars. Now there's a few cars you might want to watch out for. Those are the C4 Corvettes and the 2002 Dodge Vipers. Those are miles above anything else on the grid. However, there is one that is even above them, and that is the Chevy Corvette C7, which is typically driven by Fraga. That car is miles above anything else, and honestly I think it's probably pushing over 700 pp, a little bit like we see with the Alfa Romeo in the European 600 events. That car is incredibly quick and maybe the only one that you might struggle against in the long run, but since there's 5 laps here of Trial Mountain, which is around about a 2-minute plus lap, it should give you plenty of time to actually chase him down. I actually managed to on the end of lap 2, again using that high power on the straights to really kind of propel me along, and then whilst I did lose a bit of time in the corners, it wasn't too much, as again it kind of equaled itself out. I eventually took the lead down the inside, but only for a moment, as the Corvette put all of that grip to good use and got the lead back before trying a little bit of a switchback, putting the power down and then driving away into the sunset. Yep, 800 brake horsepower really came in useful here, especially in the start finish and the tunnel section. In the end I managed to build up a decent lead of just over 20 seconds, but really that doesn't feel like too much given how long the actual track itself is, but not too bad in the end. Anyway, that is the third tick of the week. As for payouts for this one, a little bit better, 90,000 credits, and once again that is without the clean race bonus. A total of 17.3 miles takes us to our driving marathon, which was a 5-star. Also, we get the bonus of 200,000 credits for 3 events. So moving on to the 4th event of the week. This is the WTC 600 at Spa. Now, just know this is a set PP limit, which means it must be 600 or under, and that sounds okay, but a lot of the cars you're up against are incredibly high performance cars. So just be aware, this is probably the trickiest event of the week. week. Now, as for my car choice here, I went for one of my 600 Tokyo grind cars, the 429 Boss. Now, as for the actual event itself, it's a much bigger grid this time around. A total of 16 cars, 15 AI over a 4-lap sprint race, which means you're really going to have to get a shift on here. Now, in terms of car builds, I recommend either going for a 600 pp car, which is much quicker through the midsection where you definitely need a lot of grip and some of the AI will typically drop off, or a car that is incredibly fast, especially through the first and final sector. That way you can make up your time there, and that's exactly what the Boss does. Whilst it is pretty good through the midsection, there's plenty of grip there, it's mainly with the acceleration of this car. It is absolutely brutal. I'll have a link to it down in the description below. Of course, I did do a recent money method on this car and it did work fine for me, but it's definitely an acquired taste when it comes to dragging it around Spa. It's incredibly aggressive overall. However, it did work well for me and I was able to get cars picked off 1 by 1 or 2 by 2, as they typically run in their own little groups. Eventually I would get on the back of the leader after chasing him down for an entire lap, get into the midsection, and then eventually kind of just having to run behind him until we got on the straight, got the power down, and eventually got ourselves into first place. After that it was all about building up the lead, which we did to around about just over 8 seconds as we come up across the line, absolutely burning out that rubber. So there we go then, tick number 4 of the week. As for the payout for this one, it's not too bad, but it's not great. 120,000 credits with that clean race bonus of 4 laps really isn't too bad. Let's move in to the final event then. So to finish up this week then, it is the Neo Classic competition, one of my favourite events in the entirety of Gran Turismo 7. This is set at the Red Bull Ring, so do expect different weather. It will completely be dynamic. It will rain sometimes, then it won't. We do also have tyre and fuel usage on. Now, as for my car choice, I went for the Mercedes CLK, which definitely got the job done, even though it does sit in Group 2 and will be put up against Group 1 cars and such. Now, as for the actual race itself, there's a total of 16 cars on the grid, 15 AI over a 10-lap race. As for your opening strategy, I recommend something such as a fuel mix 1 or a fuel mix 3. Between those should be enough to get you to the midpoint when it will typically start to rain. However, overall, you just mainly need to work your way through the traffic to begin with, because a lot of the slower cars start at the back and they get quicker and quicker as you go on. Typically, the faster cars start coming in around about P9 to P8. That's when it starts putting in the Group 2 cars, the McLarens, Mercedes and stuff. And then of course you have the likes of the Porsches, Nissans, and the likes of the Mazda up in front of you. A lot of those cars are incredibly quick, so you will need a quick car here. Now, as for the actual race itself, once you get yourself onto around about lap 3, or you start seeing it's getting dark in the sky as you're racing around, I fully recommend keeping an eye on that weather radar. You do have a high chance of rain here. I don't think it's set in stone, and I don't think it will necessarily happen every time, but you do want to plan accordingly. As you can see, my rain started coming in at the end of lap 4, and this is where I would try doing an undercut. Now, thankfully, a lot of the AI, or fast AI should I say, had already passed the start finish line as the rain began to fall. So at this point I thought I'm going to go ahead, pit in, cover off the rain on the intermediates and let them drive around in the tricky conditions, and hopefully I can get the jump on them there. So the intermediates were selected, but really what about the fuel? This is where it can be really hit and miss. Most of the time I will just fill the car to full or just a little touch over the actual notch on screen. However, if it is wet weather, I fully recommend just running fuel mix 6 for stability, and of course just keeping it nice and clean in the wet, since the AI are typically very slow in those conditions, and the last thing you want to do is put the entire power down in the wet and then spin out. But overall you want to be saving as much fuel as possible in the wet, and then of course turning the car up at the end. So honestly, I would just overfuel at this point. So back on track we went, and eventually we would get that undercut to work. As you can see, taking first place with relative ease. A lot of the cars stranded in the pit lane, and of course the conditions getting even trickier. But eventually the rain would pass and conditions would begin to dry up. Not properly though, as it would pretty much remain in intermediate conditions all the way to the end. The next thing is honestly just watching out for the lap traffic, as they can get in the way, as they tend to struggle in changing conditions. And of course, at that point you should be able to go ahead and take a relatively easy win. After 10 laps, I had a gap of almost 10 seconds. That gives me my 5th and final tick of the week. As for payouts, it was 154,000 credits without the clean race bonus, but of course we do get that 6-star ticket for completing all 5. So let's go ahead and open up our rewards this week then. Our first is our daily driving marathon, which was the very rare 5-star ticket. I would say this is now the rarest ticket in the game. You never really see it. And as for my reward, well, I would end up with the Lamborghini Huracan. This is a pretty worthwhile reward and not too bad for just over 20 plus miles driven. Again, I can go ahead and sell it if I need to. So next up then, what about the rest of the tickets? So of course, first of all, we do have 100k, then we have 200k for completing free events, so we're going to add those to the account. And then of course, last off, we do have one of the best tickets possible, the 6-star roulette ticket, which can contain free vehicles, free credits, and really typically the best stuff in the game. Now here we do have the Toyota Hypercar, the Ford Le Mans GT, and of course the 500k credits. Whilst I probably would have preferred the cars, I did end up with the 500k credits, but of course we'll just go ahead and add those to the account, and that's going to take our total upwards of almost 82 million. Anyway, huge thank you to all of my channel members. That's going to be it for today's video. I hope you have a fantastic start to your weekend, and of course a huge thank you to everybody that watched at home. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Take care guys, peace.